Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Okay, guys, this week's nutrition nugget, we're talking about percent daily value. So these are the numbers on the far right side of the nutrition facts on the packaged foods. And I'm bringing this up because I hear about it from people in two ways. Either we're reading labels and practicing reading labels, and people are looking at this number instead of the grams or milligrams. Or people are looking at a vitamin or a supplement and are concerned when something is over 100%. So we're going to tackle this in just a couple minutes. So I want to start with a couple definitions. So the first is RDA. So RDA is the recommended daily allowance and is based on the average daily level of intake sufficient to meet the nutrient requirements of nearly all healthy people. So that's 98% of healthy people. Okay. RDI. So the RDA, the recommended daily allowance, informs the RDI, which is the reference daily intake or the recommended daily intake. And this takes the RDA and sort of adjusts it for population based on all age groups and sexes and all of those kinds of things. So it's essentially identical to the highest RDA value for any group. And this was specifically developed for food labeling. And then that brings us to the DV, the daily value that's on our food labels. So the percentage daily value is the percentage of the amount of that ingredient or that nutrient specifically in a serving of food. And it's a percentage, right? So it's based on a 2,000 calorie diet. And again, remember, it's for, I'm putting in quotes, healthy people. Some people also notice there's a term AI, and that's used for some ingredients like potassium, for example. AI stands for adequate intake, and it's used when there's relatively limited or insufficient evidence on a specific nutrient. So it hasn't been studied to their desired level to get to an RDI, so they use AI. And here's the catch with all of this, right? So it was originally designed during World War II in an effort to prevent malnutrition, which might impact national defense. So the research that was accepted in 1941 offered numbers that were based on preventing a generally healthy person from deteriorating and developing rickets or scurvy. So while there have been some revisions over the years, it really hasn't been revised to a point of these numbers creating true wellness, right? So the numbers don't take into account the bioindividuality. It's not accounting for the standard American diet, right? And the underlying assumption is that it was to prevent somebody who is well from deteriorating to deficiency. So this is actually where we're at today. The scientific report of the 2020 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee published an 835-page report outlining that the Americans are deficient in vitamins D, A, E, C, folate, calcium, magnesium, potassium, fiber, and iron. 5 of those levels were to the point of qualifying as a public health concern because underconsumption is linked to adverse health outcomes. So, nevertheless, right, this is regulated, again in air quotes, by the FDA. And it's used to determine, right, this daily value is used to determine if a food can say low in sodium, for example. So let's look at this in action for a hot second. In the case of sugar, so the FDA does not have a specific guideline defining what it means for a product to say low in added sugar or even healthy. So the 2015 to 2020 Dietary Guidelines for Americans recommends limiting calories from added sugar to no more than 10% of each day. Now let's calculate this. 10% of a 2,000 calorie diet is 200 calories, which is almost 50 grams of sugar, which for us to wrap our head around it, I know your eyes are, I know. So for us to wrap our head around it, that's about 12 teaspoons of sugar per day. Now, the American Heart Association recommends that our daily added sugar intake be limited to 6 teaspoons for women, 9 for men, and kids like 3 to 6 teaspoons. So we even have it in our governing bodies and our medical research bodies not agreeing on what these values should be or what's recommended for our health, right? And then this whole sugar thing was actually in the news recently. I don't know if you all heard about it. There was a court in Ireland that determined Subway, the sandwich chain, that their bread had too much sugar for their country's guidelines to even call it bread. Unreal. So the court judgment said that sugar makes up 10% of the weight of the flour in Subway's recipe, which is 5 times what their law deems acceptable for bread. So they qualify it as cake, not bread, in Ireland. So according to Subway's data, they say that a 6-inch Subway bread contains 3 to 5 grams of sugar, except the gluten-free has 7 grams of sugar. So if you're keeping track, you guys, going back to the American Heart Association's recommendation, that 6-inch sandwich would max out a kid and an adult woman's daily sugar intake. Not to mention whatever you're having in the rest of that meal, which typically has, sugar in the processed meat, sugar in the sauces, the chips, maybe you're having a soda with it. So we really want to understand what this percent daily value is telling us and how misleading this information is, right? The other occurrence of this question is when it comes to labels of supplements or vitamins. So remembering that those values were to prevent rickets and scurvy and a person who is generally well at the starting gate. Well, we can all agree rickets and scurvy are not running rampant these days, but the U.S., right? Thank goodness. But we are a country of people here in the U.S. who are overfed and undernourished. So food deserts now today refer to not the absence of food, but the absence of nutrition. So if we're to utilize supplementation to help us fill in the gaps and help us heal, which can be a great idea, we're likely going to need more than what those amounts are that we're supposed to prevent us from developing scurvy. So if your vitamin says it's giving you more than 100% of a nutrient, it's not necessarily cause for alarm, especially if those vitamins are water soluble, right? Because you'll just pee them out. But as I always say with supplementation, enlist an expert to help you. Reach out to me if you have questions or Dr. Nirvana, and don't be alarmed. Okay, so looking ahead, the 2020 to 2025 guidelines and impact study are forthcoming. And so we'll see how the FDA catches up. But I just have to tell you, I'm not super hopeful based on their track record of how they adjust to what our bodies actually need for today. So that's why we're sharing this information, so that you can be an avid advocate for your own health and a smart label reader and to know exactly what's going on. So bottom line, you can ignore the percent daily value on the label of your packaged foods, and it's often okay to see greater than 100% of a certain nutrient on the bottle of your vitamin, especially if those are the water-soluble ones. Good?
Fantastic. That was great information.
Thanks. One more time, Dr. Nirvana, thank you for being here.
Thank you again for having me on, Jen. I love your podcast. I love what you have to offer. And again, thank you.
Well, the feeling is mutual. And as always, guys, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram at Jenn Trepeck, JennTrepeck. Our Facebook page is at the same handle. So reach out to share your key takeaway from today's episode. I can't wait to hear from you. And of course, if you're not already a member, join our membership program by going to glow.fm salad with a side of fries to get this week's recipe for stuffed cabbage and 10% off my favorite adrenal cortisol, thyroid, and stress support herbal formula. Everybody, remember our health, happiness, and longevity are tied to the seemingly small choices that we make each day. Be good to your thyroid, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.